Today on the show, we discuss what makes a monster and what makes a man.
With worms in their brain.
Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Bruce.
I'm Caleb.
And we are back for, what season number are we on? Do you know?
The
latest one.
The latest one. I'm not sure about the extent to which we're doing season numbers because of how much we've also done spin-offs at this point.
True. But regardless, it's been a while, we're back in style, and we're ready to roll with the game of the year.
Honestly, let's be real. Good chance this becomes game of the decade.
Of the decade. This is what Skyrim was to 2010s. Honestly, Baldur's Gate 3 has been an incredible game, start to finish. I did not even know about Baldur's Gate or Larian Studios until this summer when it was starting to launch and I started hearing stuff, and I waited until launch day to play it, and it became my entire life. It's still just being replayed, and I don't replay a lot of games. I am replaying this for the third or fourth time. It's huge. There's so much stuff going on. And honestly, I couldn't wait to start doing a Lore Party episode on this stuff.
I'm honestly on the same result end of the spectrum. I'm on the opposite end of the discovery spectrum, where I was a fan of I was a massive fan of Divinity, and was trying to get people to do Divinity episodes way back in the day, but no one else wanted to play those games.
Well, maybe now they will.
Yeah, honestly, we need to get the feedback, get in everyone's replies, tell them you want Divinity episodes now. We got to get into that juicy Rivellon elf lore.
I think we're going to jump into it, honestly. Why not?
Yeah. With that, though, I was a big fan of that game, so when they announced they were doing the next Baldur's Gate game, I've been excited for years for this game and following its development. I was all over early access when it dropped. I remember back when, in the earliest version of early access, back when Gale was an asshole.
What patch was that then?
I don't even know. The earliest version of the release just had you didn't pull Gale out of the sigil. He walked out of the sigil and just condescended at you for 10 minutes before joining your party. And that was pretty much everyone. Everyone just condescended at you and
was just complained. Kind of a dick.
Yeah, now we still have a little bit of a dick, but I think everyone's dickishness is a lot more reined in than it used to be.
Nice. Just chodes all around. I love it.
Yeah. They straight up rewrote Will's entire story.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that. We'll talk about that later, but today we are talking specifically about the true star of Baldur's Gate 3, the Illithids. It's been, I think, something that we've talked about for a while now, but it was more or less revolving around the whole premise of Baldur's Gate 3, which was, what makes an Illithid, what makes you, and basically how much of you is left over in becoming an Illithid. So first, we're first letting you know that if you haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, or you're in the middle of Baldur's Gate 3, or maybe just played it once and didn't get all of the different lore and story stuff, spoilers abound. You have to make sure that we are not spoiling you for anything. So if you don't want to hear anything about the whole game's little secrets and Easter eggs or all the different lore there, try to finish it up as best you can, and then you can come back to us.
I think another general asterisk, and I'm saying this now to save myself from having to save this before like half of the things I'm going to be saying, is a lot of the other lore we're going to be diving into is elements of D&D's Forgotten Realms lore, which is decades old and gets rewritten constantly and often contradicts itself. So there are going to be some elements, and I'll specify when and where. But if anyone ever says that, like, actually, according to the books, this X, Y, or Z is true, that's one book, and a different book probably says a different thing, and everything contradicts itself. So there is a degree to which this is going to be like broad aggregate information from multiple sources when we're talking about things that are outside of the canon of very specifically Baldur's Gate 3, the game.
Exactly. In fact, everyone might be right, you know? In a perfect world.
Yes. Exactly. Everyone might be a little bit right. Everyone might be a little bit mindful. Everyone has just a couple points in the, what is it, the Illithid powers tree.
So first we're going to be talking about what it means to become a Mind Flayer. Because a Mind Flayer cannot exist without first taking its host, it kind of begs the question of how much of anyone is left after becoming an Illithid, if at all. And then we're going to talk about, you know, the biology of Mind Flayers, their history, and then talk about, you know, the Mind Flayer characters that we see in the game, coupled with some of the lore that Caleb has so tirelessly looked through and combed through in all of the different books that he could find from the Forgotten Realms lore, and kind of come with at least our own personal conclusions about this question.
They literally have a second edition source book called The Illithiad.
Can you get it on Amazon?
That is, I found a PDF on DM's Guild.
Oh, you found it. Yes. It's sometimes it's just lying around on the internet.
Yes.
Everyone's cool with it.
Yes.
Everyone's cool with it, listeners. It's fine. But before that, we love to let you all know that we love hearing from our listeners. So email us at podcast@loreparty.com with your thoughts and episode ideas. Or honestly, if you just want to rant to us and say that we've missed this very particular piece of lore from a very obscure book that talks about Mind Flayers that we may not or may have talked on during this episode that you'd like us to talk about more, or that, you know, you just wanted to see our take on it, go ahead and send that to us. And of course, you can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at lore_party. So, first question is, why talk about this? It took a long time for me to kind of like land on this, because I definitely wanted to talk about lore on Baldur's Gate 3. And as someone who plays a lot of D&D and has played for, you know, over half a decade at this point, it's been a wonderful thing to kind of like show what I already know, what I've already learned, and then put it with Baldur's Gate 3. But I think it was great to just maybe do a first episode on, you know, the big thing that the entire game revolves around, which is Mind Flayers. It's something that is also not super dependent on people's playthroughs. You're always going to see the Mind Flayers, and I think it would be a good way to introduce this next series of episodes. And becoming a Mind Flayer is something that, you know, you're obsessed about. Your character, whether origin or original or dirge otherwise, is obsessed with at the very beginning to the very end, because it's something that you may become, whether by your own choice or involuntarily. It's always just in the back of your head. When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I make others become Mind Flayers? It's just, I don't know. It feels like it's a great way to start, you know, in exploring this new lore heavy video game.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the more iconic elements from just this broader Forgotten Realms lore, and has a lot of rich history to it. So just being able to tap into that and like build off of just how honestly interesting of a concept, like how, and or even just unsettling. Like, it's one of those things that when you hear about like the way that it works, you're just it's creepy and uncomfortable in a way that sticks with you.
Yeah, yeah. And stick with you, it truly does, both in and out of game. But first, let's do an early ad break, and then we'll see you right back.
Wait, what? Okay, they're back. I was getting worried there for a second.
Hopefully they all stayed with us.
I mean, okay, one person left, but from what I can see, it looks like
they'll be back.
Related. I'm
oh yeah. They had to get back to work. It's okay. You guys
they're
are
back.
Cool.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for coming back.
They just skipped a little bit far ahead on the timeline scrubber.
Hey, that's fine. Whatever. I get it. Capitalism makes fools of us all. Anyway.
Yes.
First, we will talk about the biology of the illithid. The life cycle of the Mind Flayer is a parasitic one. It begins when an illithid tadpole is placed into the mind of a host, slowly but almost abruptly turning it into a Mind Flayer, fully fledged and formed into the world. This is a very interesting part of the Mind Flayer life cycle, as it shows that they cannot exist without hosts. They cannot exist without people and humans or any other living sentient creature. It carries out the will of the elder brain or higher Mind Flayers. So it's kind of a hierarchical system of its Mind Flayer society. And it, again, can then turn into a fully fledged Mind Flayer, which then either enacts its will upon citizens or denizens of any other plane that it may happen upon, and find more unsuspecting victims to drop more of these tadpoles, usually into their eyes, as it burrows into their brain and begins the cycle anew.
But I will say, the eyes, interestingly, wasn't in the original books that I was finding. Most of the ones that I was looking at were more ears.
Yeah, that's gross.
A little bit more Animorphs energy.
Ew. Okay. Tadpole to your head. What are you choosing?
I mean, am I choosing like go turn into a Mind Flayer or not?
No, that's gonna happen. That's out of your control. But the Mind Flayer whom has you tied to a table is giving you your choice. What orifice are you gonna take the tadpole?
I think both would suck. I just don't want to have to watch it. Like,
you can't really get away from that if it's in your eye.
Yeah, it's they both are uncomfortable. I mean, here's the other flip side: party full of druids fighting a bunch of ear crawling aliens. Like, that's just the Animorphs.
I never read them, actually. I don't know anything about it.
I mean, you've played Baldur's Gate 3, so
that's Animorphs?
Pretty much the next best things. That's pretty much the next best thing.
Oh, wow. Okay, I guess I should get into that. I guess I would say mouth, because I would at least give them a hard time by just like trying to spit or chew it out. But I'm sure they'd get me eventually.
Yeah.
Gross, though. It would taste horrible, I'm sure.
Could we do like a Parasite the Maxime type of deal where like it takes an arm instead?
Sure. I guess we could do that. So in Baldur's Gate 3, very, very early, almost probably the first thing our character, origin or otherwise, sees is a Mind Flayer holding a tadpole up to our cornea as it begins to burrow itself into our cranium on the nautiloid. The Mind Flayers are a very vicious race, doing this to any and everyone that they can find to do what they are hoping to create something called the Grand Design, which we'll talk about later. But it's usually just done without their consent. I don't think there's a lot of races or individuals out there who are just super chill with that. But Caleb, I think you have a little bit more on this in the source books.
Yeah, I think I will say that this is one of the interesting elements where I think the source books and the games have a little bit of interesting difference. It's stated pretty overtly in the source books that Ceramorphosis robs the host of its identity into its new life as a Mind Flayer.
And Ceramorphosis is known as just like the process in which a host turns into a Mind Flayer.
Exactly. And functionally the books are pretty overt that this is the same as a character dying. Of the Mind Flayer has replaced the original personality, and while the Mind Flayer may have the memories, the individual itself is no longer there. Whereas Baldur's Gate 3 directly contradicts that by having
some exceptions.
By having some exceptions to that. It has at least one character who pretty clearly seems to have at one point been a historical figure that you meet that appears to have at least enough of their original memories that they cling to some of their old names and relationships, even if their personality's been warped. But then on the flip side, you also end up in situations where you as a player or several of your party members can become Mind Flayers, and tellingly, you don't lose control of your character when that happens. You transform and you retain the bulk of who you are.
Right.
And so the elements of that are contradict that. The people who transform do have some form of psionic assistance in their transformation, so it's possible that to some degree someone is helping them keep some part of themselves. But it is an interesting element of the story that does fly in the face of what the books themselves say.
Right. So Baldur's Gate 3 takes heavily from, specifically, I would say, 5th edition, not 5e, but 5th edition. I mean, one and the same, but just, for technical terms, Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast. And, it's building mostly from that, but obviously kind of writing its own story there. And at least in story and in the game, most of the people that you talk to kind of have that very similar defeatist attitude. There's not much of any way to gain control or reverse such a transformation. And in the game, it just kind of shows this very legendary act of being able to do that. And that kind of meshes in, and as we'll kind of go on, it's just very unheard of. But almost immediately, once you're able to get through the tutorial level on the Nautiloid, you kind of go around looking for a cure, and almost everyone who's at least somewhat knowledgeable or capable of doing anything from healing to, crazy wild magic is talking to you like you are, a dead man walking. They explain to you in gruesome, grotesque, and excruciating detail all of what happens to you as you start to lose all of your mental faculties, and your skin starts changing color and your fever starts running higher. It's honestly one of the most terrifying things. And each person who you talk to just makes the whole situation so much dire every single time. So that kind of brings us to Mind Flayer history. The Mind Flayers have been around for a while, and they've been around in the D&D universe for a very long time. They've always been characterized by their usually purple skin, squid faces, I believe cloaks or just some very otherworldly dress, and wanting to enact the grand design, a sort of master plan of turning the entire world into Mind Flayers under the control of their entire race. They don't really do this out of, a need to help the world or, make the multiverse a better place because there is order. It's just sort of what they do. It's their nature. They're power hungry, multiversal alien parasitic species that want nothing but to create, more of itself, like gray goo.
Yeah, for a long period of time, they were a part of that major civilization where they did originally have control of most of the multiverse and multiple races under their psionic subjugation, like living as their thralls. And then eventually that changed.
Yeah, and it all started with the Gith. What we know now as the modern descendants of the Gith are the Githyanki, a race that were previously enslaved by the Mind Flayers to do their bidding, but instead rebelled against them, against in their mother tongue, Geich. Am I saying that right? Geich. Geich. Masters, and cultivated their own. We actually first meet a Githyanki as our first companion on the Nautiloid during the tutorial, Lae'zel, who understands the severity of the situation almost immediately and wants very desperately to take your character and find the nearest creche, which is sort of like a home base or a school, hospital kind of like location for Githyanki on the material plane and other places to find some sort of cure.
It is specifically creche is a more of a hatchery where it's where young Githyanki get trained and taught to fight, and then when they kill a Mind Flayer is when they're officially allowed to go to the astral plane with the rest of their people.
Beautiful. And I mean, this has been a very long relationship between the Githyanki and the Mind Flayers. They are sworn enemies, with both diametrically opposed to one another's plans, where the Githyanki want to completely exterminate the Mind Flayers as they are a constant threat to all life in the multiverse, whereas, of course, the Mind Flayers want nothing more than to subjugate the entirety of the multiverse under their thumb and rule as their Mind Flayer slaves once more, and back into an age of the Grand Design.
Mm-hmm. And where a lot of the rebellion had originally come from is that the original mother of the Githyanki was originally a slave named Gith, who led the rebellion to overthrow the Mind Flayers. And among Gith's followers and army, eventually there was another faction that broke away called the Gith Zerai, which followed another philosopher named Zerthamon. And so the Gith Zerai were a lot more neutral, a lot more peaceful, still hated Mind Flayers, but were a lot more go home, sit in the corner, and stay away from doing things, and stay away rather than trying to themselves expand an empire. But the thing that complicated the Githyanki's history is the fact that Gith ended up being betrayed and killed by her advisor in a pact with the dragons. And that's why Githyanki ride dragons, and that's why Gith herself isn't in Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, what would you say, Caleb, is your kind of impression, or like at least what you would say is the player's first impression in meeting Lae'zel, and later on in the first act meeting Kithrak Voss and the Githyanki people as a whole?
In my original solo playthrough,
Uh-oh.
Lae'zel was not alive when we reached Act 2.
Okay. You and my wife both have let this woman die, and I don't understand it. She is doing the best she's got.
Blackith wanted us to go into the prism to kill our dream visitor, and as much as I'm all on team let's kill the dream visitor for unrelated reasons, at the time I was not on board with that plan.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess I was more just asking what the characteristics of like how the Githyanki feel about the Mind Flayers. Like they did not seem at all like forgiving about anyone, even if they're their own being infected.
I think it definitely makes lore sense why they're like it, in the sense of any version of us that could potentially be weak enough to be cooperative could potentially become weak enough to be subjugated again, and having that be such a core part of your history, I can see how that would become something that would just be very like defining and central to Githyanki ideology. But at the same time, it's worth pointing out that Vlaakith is lying, and she betrayed and killed Gith, and she doesn't actually plan to ascend any of her followers. She's a lich who consumes their souls to extend her own life.
We are going to lose all of our Githyanki sponsorships and viewerships because of that, Caleb.
Yeah.
I would just want to let you know that it's going to be rough.
So you're going to hear an ad for silver swords and +1 medium plate armor later. It's actually going to be blank dead air now because the Githyanki pulled their support of it.
Actually, don't worry about it. I already got a new one, and we're going to play it right now.
Wait, what?
Wasn't that a great ad? Not for Githyanki stuff because we ruined that base, but hey, we got that one.
Yeah, we got a new sponsor, and it was great.
So now we're going to get to the segment of the episode where we kind of talk about the Mind Flayers that we know in game specifically. So obviously we see a Mind Flayer almost immediately on the Nautiloid, but this is your kind of like run-of-the-mill Mind Flayer under the thrall of the mother brain, grand design, yada, yada, yada. As I said before, they're squid-headed, mind-munching monsters devoid of most of any personality or characteristics of their previous hosts. They clamor for the same thing. They need brains. They need to make more people, or make more Mind Flayer people. And, that's it. That's all they got. They do talk from time to time telepathically, but really it's just that.
I will say we don't see a whole lot of this in the game, but the books are pretty explicit that Mind Flayers do still have individuality even after their transformation. So it isn't like a Borg situation where they're all part of a shared collective singular hive mind. They still have their psionic powers, but they still are and identify as individuals.
Yeah, like fascists.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly like fascists. So beyond that of who we see on the Nautiloid, the first, at least non-hostile Mind Flayer that we meet that isn't bleeding on the ground is Omelum, who is just a rogue Mind Flayer who broke free of the Elder Brain's thrall down in the Underdark. He's a member of the Brilliant Society, which is, dedicated to learning more about the Underdark, and it's more of like an intellectual, scientific community.
The Society of Brilliance is actually, it's a little bit broader than the Underdark specifically.
Oh.
But that's what Omelum overall is working on. Omelum specifically is trying to develop his alchemy abilities in the hopes of finding an alternative for brains for Mind Flayers, and in the meantime living off of the brains of people who are cruel or tyrannical, which thankfully, I say thankfully in quotes, which unfortunately but conveniently, there are a lot of in the Underdark.
Absolutely. And your character kind of meets Omelum, of course, rattled and shaken, because the last time they were face to face with the Mind Flayer, it was on much more different terms. But truly, he is my dude, like just honest to God, a super chill guy who's just like, hey, I broke free. I'm clear of that. And he said that he was able to just break free of it through innate sorcerer's powers, and really just is trying to do his best as an individual, and no longer being kind of a part of whatever the grand design was trying to do. For the entire time, I myself was just thinking, okay, when's he going to betray me? And the moment never came, and I like was just so proud of him. It was just, Omelum is my guy.
He came in clutch in the Iron Throne.
Absolutely. Like, he was just there for it.
Iron Throne was rough, but he came in clutch.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other one that we don't know immediately is a Mind Flayer, but did also act as an ally, was the Emperor, who we learn in the beginning of Act 3 was a Mind Flayer all along, and not the beautiful, hot dream visitor that I spent an hour making my first playthrough.
Exactly. And not only was he an adventurer, he wasn't any adventurer. He was, in fact, Balduran, the founder of the city of Baldur's Gate, who was turned into a Mind Flayer by the Elder Brain. Specifically, it was actually by the Elder Brain who would later go on to become the Absolute.
Could you even imagine the kind of feeling that you would have if that happened to you in real life? That there was a dream visitor who turns out to be a Mind Flayer, and then you go through all this stuff and you're trying to save the world, and then it turns out that it's like George Washington.
Like, George Washington got turned into a unspeakable eldritch creature, and decided to appear in my dreams as a hot chick. Such a bizarre sequence of events.
It makes me so upset because I'm just like, what the hell? You didn't think that was important information?
He could have just appeared in people's dreams as Balduran. Like,
I would have been like, yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. Balduran. What else do you need?
Like it's just, it's so bizarre.
Do you think that would be less believable than just, some made up person saying that they're an adventurer? Because, like, I would kind of, if I would have a dream, and then in that dream, George Washington comes up to me and says, my boy, the city, this world, it needs you, and we must help each other. I will help you. I was once an adventurer like you, and then I created the United States of America. We must work together to save it from the grand design. I'd be like, I need to stop drinking before bed.
Yeah, that's fair. I think. Look, I mean, to be fair, years ago, what is it? Guild Wars 2 tried pretty much the same plot twist, where it was, hey, this character's been lying to you. They're actually a famous historical figure. Why they didn't just tell you they were this person the entire time? To make you want to work with them and make you suspicious when you found out they were lying about who they were. I don't know, but hey.
I wonder if it's like a whole thing of like being a celebrity where it's just like, I don't want to be noticed. I don't want people to know.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna pretend to be an unrelated person.
Then they start giving me favors and saying how much they love Baldur's Gate, and I'm like, I had no part in planning the city layout, and it's just a whole thing. I didn't want to go through it.
Exactly. So all of this joking aside, Balduran turned into the Mind Flayer known as the Emperor, but the thing that complicated this is his friend Ansur the Bronze Dragon managed to free him from the Elder Brain's control and was looking for a way to turn him back from being an Illithid and reverse the transformation. Balduran was not on board with this and kind of dug being a Mind Flayer, which led to Ansur to attempt to kill him, but ended up being killed in the attempt.
And again, all of this being stacked on top of it in game was so much for my character, because I was like so excited to go through these like cool heroes trials and actually get to meet a dragon and have to like talk my way through it. And then I just come over to a corpse of a dragon. It wakes up and says, "I'm talking to you, Balduran," and then it's the Mind Flayer Emperor, and I'm just like, "Excuse me?"
Like, look, some days you just want to walk up to zombie Thomas Jefferson and not have him immediately call out, what is it, Eldritch Squid George Washington.
No. This isn't even like if it's Thomas Jefferson being Ansor. It is like Bigfoot. Zombie Bigfoot saying, "I'm not gonna work with you, George Washington. You killed me." I'd be like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Zombie Bigfoot rejected George Washington, the
They used to be
monster.
good friends. They used to be buds. He's a mystical creature and he's the founder of the freaking country. I'd be like, when did this happen?
The epic war between Paul Bunyan and his ox. Like,
exactly. Like, what the fuck? So those are two like bigger examples of at least Mind Flayer characters whom we're able to discuss and debate, you know, what it means to be a Mind Flayer. And Omelum shows us that, you know, through his own, you know, innate abilities and force of will, he was able to break free and live a very peaceful life and working towards, you know, ending what his people are doing. But the Emperor is one who was kind of, say, like we were talking about, through like the mystical powers that be, and then him finding the artifact with Orpheus within it that kind of shows, hey, they're a Mind Flayer, but it doesn't always have to be in the same way. But now I'd like to talk about the Mind Flayer that one can become in the game. So at the end of Act 3, when all hope is lost, we did not get that 99 save in the last attempt to get the Ender Brain on our side with the stones. We are then...
I'll say parenthetically, even if you do get the 99 save, have you seen what happens if you do get
Oh,
it?
yeah. My wife did it first try. It was maddening. It was infuriating to
That's
see
insane.
that. But after all those failures, you know, you are dragged back to the astral plane with the Emperor and your group, and the Emperor just basically explains, we can't do this without someone thinking like a Mind Flayer, but having the power of Orpheus. Orpheus, of course, is the Githyanki prince who has been shelled up in the prison of the artifact for, what was it, like 1,000 years? Mm-hmm. And basically what the Emperor has been kind of using to keep everyone from turning into a Mind Flayer or being enthralled in the Elder and/or Ender Brain's thrall power. And you have to kind of choose who gets to lose their identity forever and become a Mind Flayer. The best game. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of different people who can do it, but Caleb, why don't you go first?
Yeah, and so with that, anyone can take the Astral Plane Touch Tadpole to become a Mind Flayer, and they can combine with Orpheus's ability for that. So yeah, so you have a few options as far as people who like can take it and can do it. Orpheus can turn into a Mind Flayer, but still retains his sense of identity. He attempts to kill himself. At the end of it, you can dialogue check him out of it, but like still retains enough of his sense of self that it includes his hatred of Mind Flayers. In my run, the person who actually became a Mind Flayer was actually Karlach.
Yeah.
because she did that specifically to prevent her engine from destroying her.
And you know what? I mean, I guess that's a cool loophole out of it, because then you won't need that.
Yeah, and it worked.
How was she like once she transformed?
She was still herself, and they like stated it, and she actually states it outright, where you can get into a dialogue with her afterwards, and she outright says that she's like still feels like herself, still recognizes herself.
So I can also attest, because I just did this for a very previous playthrough, was the Emperor also asked to just get Orpheus's power. However, in order to do that, you do have to kill Orpheus, which Lae'zel usually doesn't like. And I found it very interesting because through almost all the different playthroughs I did, I rejected that option. And the Emperor is just like, you are dooming us. This sucks. I'm out of here. And he just sides with the Enderbrain, and you have to fight him. The last one I did, I said, okay, Emperor, let's see what you got. And I let him eat Orpheus's brain and gain his power. And I'll be damned if he did not keep up his end of the bargain. It was so weird because I thought that was just like an inevitable thing where the Emperor is just going to betray you regardless, or he wanted the power for himself so he could, be the next Elder Brain or leader of the Mind Flayers. But it was very interesting to see that, like, he would have definitely been able to be your savior and help and stop everything, and then just continue. I don't know, like that. It was just very strange to see that. Like, why would you even side with? It is
strange to see that. I will say, before we give Balduran / the Emperor too much credit, just a general asterisk reminder. The Emperor is still a bastard.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, mind flayers have individuality and have a mind of their own, and it's because they have a mind of their own that I can say the Emperor is a goddamn bastard who mind controlled Duke Stelmane.
Oh yeah, he's canceled.
killed his best friend. It sucks. Like, yeah,
we don't even know if they were actually best friends. In one option that you can say, if you're like really mean to the Emperor, he will just completely throw down all airs and all pleasantries and just say, you know what? That's right. I just paraded Stelmane around like a marionette. It was just theater because I wanted to, and I'm not doing that to you. And good Lord.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and then that's on top of the fact that he killed his best friend, Bigfoot / Thomas Jefferson / Answer.
It was, in no way is this excusing everything that Balduran the Emperor has done. It is just, to me, more or less confusing, because I'm just like, okay, but we were going to just give this to somebody else. Why do you want it? What's up? Like, if you can't have it, you're just going to side with the Enderbrain? Like, it kind of felt like he was being more Mind Flayer than Balduran, but there was still some Balduran in there. But of course, the last option is, other than any of the origin characters, the Emperor or Orpheus, is you. The Tav /OC /original character that is put into here.
Dark Urge.
/Dark Urge can be able to take on the form of a Mind Flayer, which was a very interesting thing to see. I have not personally done it, but I have seen some playthroughs with that, which is very interesting, of like how you make that transformation. Again, you are still cognizant in who you are and what's going on and what you want to do. And a very interesting moment that happens in the new epilogue that's added in Baldur's Gate 3 shows that as you're talking to one of your friends at the party, you have this overwhelming urge to want to eat their brain. And you have to like make a roll and like try and resist that urge of like just having to, attack them right then and there to get their brain, which is like a very scary moment that shows that, a happily ever after, but you are still like cursed and like there is still this horrible hunger in you and this innate instinct to devour intelligence that will never really leave you.
Oh no, I have to spend out the rest of my days as the main character in like a creepy YA novel.
Yeah, and if there's any DLC, that's going to be weird.
But yeah, the interesting element of this though, and I think this is the point of emphasis, is that you, despite having to make those checks, you don't lose control of your character. After you transform, you still control your character. You just have a bunch of Mind Flayer abilities now. And the implication within that is that you haven't died. You are still as much you as you were before.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to a really interesting bit at the end, another epilogue conversation. And I think this is the thing that a lot of people have probably been, a lot of you have probably been yelling at your respective car radios or smartphones or whatever you're playing this back on for us to finally get around to addressing, because it, on a glance, it looks like it answers our questions directly. But at the conclusion, there's a moment where Withers / Jurgle is taunting the Dead Three for their absolute plot, and basically saying that it wouldn't work. An element of the gods in this universe is that they sustain and grow their power based off of their worshippers. And a big part of what the Dead Three's plot in the Absolute was, is they were hoping to use the Mind Flayer army to get themselves a bunch of new followers. But Jurgle tells them outright that you can't use mortal souls as worshippers by turning them into Mind Flayers, because they lose their soul upon transformation. And so that sounds like the statement is that Mind Flayers lack souls. Which I'm going to come in here with my own interpretation and say I don't think that's what Jurgle's saying. I think that in context, what he's saying is that unwilling, unmodified seramorphosis, because it functions similarly to death, and the soul of the host returns to the plane of their god or gods, using seramorphosis to create worshippers isn't going to give them that divine power as actually having worshippers. And the biggest giveaway to that is that D&D lore, and this is both relatively recent books and older books, so this, is from the books, but this is from a lot of the books, does actually list 2 Mind Flayer deities, and I'm probably butchering these names, but I'm going to make a goddamn attempt at it. Ilsensign and Manzenkorian.
The last one sounded drow.
Yeah, and they do draw their power from worshippers, even when an Illithid's actual devotion is to an Elder Brain, in the technically incorrect belief that an Elder Brain will eat the Mind Flayer's consciousness, and that the Mind Flayer's consciousness will join the Elder Brain, even though that's not true. It's the same lie as Vlaakith. But it does show that Mind Flayer worship does result in the creation of deities, and Manzenkorian also is a dead god. Like, he eventually died due to a lack of worshippers, which confirms fully that the presence or absence of worship from a Mind Flayer can sustain or starve a god. Which means that if the Dead Three could, in theory, have Mind Flayer worshippers, but that means that they would need to have Mind Flayers who chose to worship the Dead Three, not subjugate the control of an Elder Brain and just say its Mind Flayers are theirs.
Yeah. This was a very sloppy, dumb plan from the beginning, but I love how dumb and how sloppy it is, because it's still just a threat regardless. But this is such a massive oversight from the Dead Three. I mean, for the love of gods, it's just the clearest thing. I don't know if it's because they have so few followers, but to not know that Mind Flayers are just like not going to give them that same thing is crazy.
So the Dead Three do actually have a specific in-lore reason for being dumbasses, and it's because they all used to be mortals.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Bane, Ball, and Merkel were all mortals at one point.
Well, that explains their power hungriness.
They overthrew the previous god of death, Jurgle, the god who stepped down and let them take over, which officially means that Withers is technically the god of saying, fuck it, I quit.
He's the rightful ruler? He's the rightful god of death?
Yeah, Jurgle was he's not rightful god of death. He is the original god of death.
To me, that's right.
But yeah, he was the god of death. He didn't even get overthrown. He quit and gave it to them. It's just all right. You three think you can do better? Let's see it. And they just proved to be colossal dumbasses.
Oh my god, I love that. And just that Withers is able to just be at the end and be like, not so easy, huh?
Yeah, that's why the whole conversation at the end was significant. I still think that dumbass though they are, still not as bad of a dumbass as Shar, who's the Faerun goddess of pointless sibling rivalries. But
so with all of that, we have learned a lot. I've learned a lot for sure from all of your additional research here. But to wrap it up, I pose this question back to you, Caleb, in telling me your thoughts on how much of a person and of a mortal and an individual is left after Ceramorphosis.
So I am going to say that I think that there are two answers. And okay. I'm going to say that the first answer is that there are ways that individuality can survive Ceramorphosis. I don't think it's what normally happens when you become a Mind Flayer, but I think that it is pretty unambiguous that it has the potential to happen. But then at the same time, I think that whether you have that assistance or not, I think that a Mind Flayer is fully an individual with a soul, one way or the other. Whether it is the same individual may depend on the circumstances, but I don't think there's any getting around the fact that a Mind Flayer is an individual with the capacity to make their own choices, and similarly the power to sustain or starve a god. But there is an interesting theory that could counter the first half of my theory on if it's true. And there isn't a whole lot in the game that overtly hints this, aside from a few interesting coincidences, but I want to float it anyway. And I want to hear your thoughts when we hear your final answer on this.
Sure.
But the possibility that you never play as a regular person in Baldur's Gate 3, that you are the Mind Flayer the entire time. Because you gain control of the character immediately after they're infested, and you lose control of the character immediately after the infestation ends, one way or the other.
To me, I don't think that. Maybe from an interactive storytelling, like headcanon maybe, but to me, it's just, that's how a role player game kind of starts. You're controlling this person, and they're at the right place at the right time. I mean, if that is true, I feel like any character in Baldur's Gate 3 or any character in the D&D universe where Mind Flayers exist could possibly be controlled by just a Mind Flayer tadpole. And then as soon as you leave them in your head and stop playing them, they turn into a Mind Flayer. But to me, I feel that this whole situation, I guess if you can call it that, sounds a bit more traumatic than just a situation, but regardless, it feels more of like the philosophical exercise of the Ship of Theseus, if you're familiar. It's for those who don't know at home, it's the thought of a ship called Theseus that went on this voyage off its port and through all of its adventures and battles and time at sea was broken and replaced with a different part until by the time it returned back to its original port was made up of completely different parts, all replaced little by little. And the question is that still the ship of Theseus, or is that a completely different ship? Much in the same way, I feel like whoever is turned into a Mind Flayer or an Illithid is still there. Because the change happened so abruptly, I don't feel like there is any way to not still be who you are. And really, I mean, Mind Flayers have, again, a thrall to them, and Illithids have this telekinetic and telepathic way of mind control, which could certainly be in a way of like not just changing the chemical makeup of your brain, but the physical. Turning you into a Mind Flayer could only be a part of it. And as we have seen in some of these examples in Baldur's Gate 3, there are ways to get around this, at least in keeping your own personality, your wants, needs, desires, for at least a time. And to me, that feels like the perfect cut in the thread here, that it shows it can be done, and that more of that could be done. Maybe not now in where Baldur's Gate 3 is, but in the future of that setting, it looks like if the power of the gods and if the power of the weave can allow itself, not only could one break free of their of the control under themselves, but if you can be able to still keep your own wits about you, what's stopping you from reverting that entire transformation back to who you once were? It would definitely take a lot of time, but optimistically, I feel like you are still there. It's changed you, it's morphed you, and perversed your entire makeup, but under all of that, you are still you. It's just really changed it and destroyed only what your form was and what your brain was to you and making you you. But it's still there. And if there's some way that you can kind of reverse it, I feel like that could happen.
So what I took from that is you consider Astarion to be the ship of Theseus.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with vampires. Their personality changes after, going through this change, and now they're a little more power hungry, and they're, they don't like competitors. They're a lot more like, predatorial, and, that's not what they used to be. They're still them, and they still had that personality. But to me, I feel like that's just a lower grade version of Ceramorphosis.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely makes sense. I think with all of that, though, I think that's about going to wrap it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us grow the show. And be sure to connect with us on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter at lore_party. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Later. Don't let the worms bite.